Since the dawn of civilization, humanity has been entangled in a profound spiritual deception, one that shaped the very foundations of our world and continues to echo through the ages. Ancient history and biblical narratives reveal a reality far stranger than we often imagine. A world where mighty beings, the Nephilim, once walked among us, and the worship of the fallen became the root of all idolatry. We often picture early humans inventing gods to explain the unknown, but the scriptures and ancient texts reveal a deeper, more sinister truth. Genesis 6:4 declares, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown." The Nephilim were not merely giants of legend, they were the living symbols of deception, the offspring of the Watchers and human women. Their existence brought chaos, violence, and forbidden knowledge, twisting the course of human history and distorting the image of God in creation. Ancient texts like Genesis, the Book of Enoch, and the Book of Jubilees describe these Nephilim as the fallen ones, whose legacy of spiritual corruption echoed through every ancient civilization. They were exalted as gods, heroes, and monsters, worshipped and feared, their stories immortalized in stone, myth, and ritual. The worship of these beings was not a simple misunderstanding of nature, but a direct violation of the first commandment. As Exodus 20:3 commands, "You shall have no other gods before me." This was a pledge of allegiance to the very entities that led humanity astray. The idols of old were more than stone and wood. They were the faces of the fallen, the Nephilim and their fathers, whose influence shaped the mythologies of Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome, and beyond. Their stories, preserved in carvings and legends, echo the reality of a world corrupted by divine rebellion. The same dark wellspring feeds the myths of distant cultures, explaining why tales of giants, monsters, and hybrid creatures appear across the globe. From the Anunnaki of Sumer, to the Titans of Greece, to the dragons and sea serpents of Asia and the Americas. The memory of this ancient corruption survived the flood, lingering in ruins, legends, and the persistent fear of the unknown. The biblical writers fiercely opposed idolatry, knowing it was never just about statues. It was about the worship of the fallen, the spiritual deception that still haunts humanity. Legends of dragons, sea serpents, and monstrous beasts may reflect the chaos unleashed by the Nephilim and their fathers, as even the animal kingdom was twisted by their corruption. These creatures became objects of fear and worship, their forms immortalized in art and epic tales, blurring the lines between man, beast, and God. After the flood, the shadow of the Nephilim persisted, especially among Israel's neighbors. The Philistines, for example, worshipped Dagon, a god depicted as part man, part fish, and produced giants like Goliath. This contrast between Goliath, the giant adversary of Israel, and Dagon, the idol of the Philistines, highlights the ongoing spiritual battle and the enduring legacy of the ancient rebellion. Did these cultures knowingly violate the first commandment by exalting the fallen ones? Or were they deceived, drawn into a web of spiritual darkness that endures to this day? The distinction between myth and theology becomes crucial here. Were these stories mere legends, or did they mask a deeper spiritual reality? The spirits of the Nephilim lingered, becoming the demonic forces that continued to influence humanity. The strategy of the fallen shifted from physical domination to spiritual deception, inspiring the creation of idols and false worship. The biblical worldview warns us, idolatry is not just a primitive superstition, but a spiritual allegiance with the forces that oppose God. This is the unseen reality behind the pantheons of the ancient world, the spiritual battles of the scriptures, and the enduring question of allegiance. Who do we truly worship? The first commandment stands as a warning against the dangers of misinterpretation and the subtle allure of the fallen. As we journey deeper, we will explore the mysteries of the SeaofMa'uk, a boundary between worlds, a symbol of chaos and judgment in the biblical imagination. What secrets lie beneath its waves? How does it connect to the ancient rebellion, the Nephilim, and the enduring influence of idolatry? The answers may change everything we thought we knew about the days of Noah, the origins of myth, and the true nature of the spiritual war that still rages today. As we unmask the idols of old, we are called to discern the difference between myth and theology and to reclaim the truth at the heart of the biblical story. After the flood, the world was forever changed. The Book of Jubilees, alongside the Book of Enoch, offers a unique perspective on what happened next, how Noah's sons divided the earth among themselves, shaping the destinies of nations and the spiritual landscape of humanity. These ancient texts do more than recount history. They reveal the transmission of forbidden knowledge and the spiritual consequences that would echo through the ages. According to Jubilees, Noah gathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and with solemn oaths, they apportioned the earth into distinct territories, each with its own boundaries and landmarks. But the Book of Enoch adds a deeper layer, describing how the Watchers, fallen angels, descended to earth, took human wives, and fathered the Nephilim, giants of old, men of renown. The Nephilim were not just physical giants, but bearers of forbidden knowledge. The Watchers taught humanity the secrets of weaponry, enchantments, astrology, and sorcery, wisdom that was never meant for mortals. This transmission of knowledge was a direct violation of the divine order, and its consequences would ripple through every ancient civilization. One of the most mysterious boundaries mentioned is the SeaofMa'uk, a vast, enigmatic body of water that some scholars believe could be the Atlantic Ocean. The SeaofMa'uk was not just a physical barrier, but a spiritual one. In the ancient imagination, it marked the edge of the known world, a place of mystery, danger, and the unknown. What lay beyond the SeaofMa'uk? Was it merely uncharted territory? Or did it conceal deeper spiritual realities? Perhaps even the origins of the so-called marine kingdoms found in later mythologies? Many cultures developed legends of powerful spirits and deities dwelling in the deep, giving rise to marine kingdom mythology and the worship of sea gods. The echoes of the Nephilim and the Watchers can be traced in the mythologies of Sumer, Egypt, Greece, India, and the Norse lands. The Sumerian Apkallu, the Egyptian gods, the Greek Titans and Olympians, the Hindu Devas and Asuras, and the Norse Aesir all bear striking similarities to the stories of the Nephilim, beings of immense power, often depicted as giants or hybrids who brought forbidden arts and knowledge to humanity. These ancient deities were often worshipped as gods, but their origins may lie in the same spiritual rebellion described in Enoch and Jubilees. The worship of these beings was not just cultural, but theological, a violation of the first commandment, which forbids the veneration of any power above the Creator. The rise of idol worship, the building of temples, and the offering of sacrifices to these gods marked a turning point in human history, a descent into spiritual corruption. As the descendants of Noah spread across the earth, new nations emerged. Among them were the Philistines, who settled along the Mediterranean coast, close to the legendary SeaofMa'uk. The Philistines became infamous for their giants and their worship of strange gods, echoes perhaps of the pre-flood Nephilim and the spiritual mysteries associated with the sea. Their chief deity, Dagon, was depicted as part man, part fish, a symbol of the enduring connection between the sea, spiritual power, and the legacy of the giants. The stories of giants and deities along the coasts raise profound questions. Did the SeaofMa'uk serve as a gateway for spiritual forces? Was it a boundary meant to protect humanity, or a threshold that once crossed unleashed new forms of corruption? As we trace the post-flood world, the SeaofMa'uk stands as a symbol of both division and mystery, a reminder that the boundaries set by Noah's sons were not just geographical, but spiritual, shaping the destinies of nations and the rise of new powers on earth. The theological implications are profound. The violation of the first commandment, the spread of forbidden knowledge, and the enduring struggle between the worship of the Creator and the veneration of ancient powers. After the flood, the physical bodies of the Nephilim were destroyed, but their legacy endured, not only in memory and myth, but in the complex spiritual hierarchies described in ancient texts like the Book of Jubilees. The Book of Jubilees reveals a layered order of corrupted beings, the Nephilim, the Naphidim, the Naphil, and the Eljo, each with distinct roles and natures, each leaving a mark on the world's imagination. The pre-flood Nephilim, as described in the Book of Enoch and echoed in Jubilees, were the direct offspring of the Watchers, spiritual beings who transgressed divine boundaries. They were the first and greatest of the corrupted hybrids of angelic and human essence. These Nephilim were not merely human, they were hybrids, part divine, part mortal, and their destruction was total in the flood. Yet their spiritual corruption did not end there. From the Nephilim came the Nephidim, a second generation, further removed from the divine but still tainted, often depicted as monstrous or unnatural. Some traditions link these beings to the origins of myths about titans, dragons, and other legendary monsters. The Nephil, a further degeneration, were even more distanced from the original Watchers, less powerful, but still marked by unnatural strength or deformity. Their stories may have inspired tales of ogres, trolls, and other fearsome beings in folklore. At the lowest rung were the Eljo, spirits of the dead Nephilim, disembodied and malevolent, seeking to corrupt humanity from the shadows. These became what we now call demons, influencing the living through fear, temptation, and idolatry. This hierarchy of corruption, Nephilim, Nephidim, Nephil, and Eljo, was not just a matter of size or strength, but of spiritual and genetic pollution. Each class represented a further step away from the divine order, a deeper descent into chaos. The Book of Jubilees and other ancient texts make clear distinctions between the pre-flood Nephilim and the post-flood giants, emphasizing that the true supernatural corruption was ended by the flood, but its memory lingered in myth and ritual. The Nephilim were the fallen ones, a term rooted in the Hebrew word naphal, meaning to fall. Their descendants, the Nephidim and Nephil, were echoes of that original fall, each generation more human, yet still marked by the curse. These beings inspired legends of titans, dragons, and unnatural creatures, symbols of chaos and rebellion against the divine order. The post-flood giants like Og and the Anakim were mortal men, sometimes fierce, sometimes feared, but never supernatural. Their genealogies are traced in scripture, showing their human origins and connections to known peoples. Claims that the Nephilim returned after the flood often rely on misreadings or later mythologies, not on the biblical text itself. The worship of giants in ancient cultures was a veneration of memory, not of living Nephilim. By building temples and offering sacrifices, humanity honored the legends of the past, not the literal presence of fallen angels or their offspring. The idea that post-flood giants were Nephilim is further rebutted by the clear biblical record. Only Noah and his family survived the flood, and they were described as perfect in their generations. No trace of angelic bloodlines remained. The spirits of the pre-flood Nephilim, according to Enoch and Jubilees, became disembodied and malevolent, what we now call demons, or the Eljo. These spirits sought influence, but the giants of Canaan and Bashan were not their physical descendants. The idols and cults established in their memory became spiritual battlegrounds, not evidence of a new Nephilim race. When people prayed to Baal, Marduk, or Zeus, they were not communing with Nephilim in the flesh, but with the lingering spirits of rebellion, the Eljo and their kin. The true Nephilim were gone, their spirits wandering, their physical line ended by the flood. This is why the Old Testament's commandments are so absolute. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image. These were not just prohibitions against art, but against reviving the spiritual rebellion of the Nephilim and their corrupted hierarchy. The Hebrew word Nephilim means fallen ones, not simply giants, but those who fell from heaven's order. Every pagan altar was a monument to the memory of that rebellion, not its physical continuation. Every pagan ritual was an act of allegiance to the spiritual enemies of God, not to living Nephilim. The war that began before the flood continued in the hearts and minds of humanity, but the true Nephilim, the fallen ones, remained only as spirits, never again as flesh and blood. These narratives of spiritual and genetic corruption shaped ancient and modern perceptions of evil and idolatry. The myths of titans, dragons, and unnatural creatures are echoes of a deeper truth, a cosmic rebellion, a hierarchy of the fallen, and humanity's ongoing struggle to resist their influence. In every age, the memory of the Nephilim and their corrupted kin has haunted the imagination, warning of the dangers of spiritual compromise and the allure of forbidden power. The legacy of the Nephilim is not just a story of giants, but a warning, a call to remember the cost of rebellion and the enduring battle between the divine and the corrupted. Thus, the commandments stand as a barrier against the return of that ancient corruption, urging humanity to choose faithfulness over fascination with the fallen. The myths of titans, dragons, and monstrous beings are but shadows of the true story, a story of spiritual hierarchy, corruption, and the hope of restoration. In the end, the Nephilim and their kin remain as warnings, reminders of what was lost and what must never be revived. The war that began before the flood continues in the stories we tell, the fears we harbor, and the choices we make. But the true Nephilim, the fallen ones, remain only as spirits, never again as flesh and blood. The events of Genesis 6, where the sons of God took human wives and produced the Nephilim, set the stage for a profound spiritual and biological crisis, one that would echo through the ages and directly challenge the first commandment, "You shall have no other gods before me." At the heart of these mysteries lies the enigmatic SeaofMa'uk, an ancient legend that hints at lost worlds beneath the waves. But what if these stories connect to legends we all know, like Atlantis, the Marine Kingdom, and the mysterious Bermuda Triangle? In the ancient world, the line between the spiritual and the physical was blurred. The Nephilim and their descendants were not just feared, but often celebrated, even worshipped as demigods or mighty kings. This veneration echoes in the legends of Atlantis, a city said to have sunk beneath the sea, ruled by powerful beings who were part human, part divine. The worship of these superhuman figures was a direct violation of the first commandment, as people elevated them to divine status. The chaos unleashed by the Nephilim may have warped the very fabric of creation, just as the legends say Atlantis was destroyed for its corruption and pride. Ancient texts like Jubilees 5:1 describe a world where all flesh corrupted its way, not just humans, but animals as well. Could this refer to the origins of the Marine Kingdom, an underwater realm filled with strange hybrid creatures, much like the monsters and mermaids of legend? Civilizations across the world left behind stories and images of monstrous hybrids, creatures that may have inspired tales of mermaids, sea monsters, and the mysterious beings said to inhabit the depths of the ocean. These myths provided a framework for the worship of beings who were neither fully human nor fully animal, but something in between, perhaps the result of Nephilim-influenced mutations, or the inspiration for the mermaid legends that still capture our imagination today. Consider the legends of Dagon, the ancient Philistine god depicted as part man, part fish. Dagon's image bridges the world of Atlantis, the Marine Kingdom, and mermaids, beings who dwell between land and sea, worshipped for their mysterious powers. From the feathered serpent gods of Mesoamerica to the dragon kings of China, these beings were objects of worship, their legends echoing the ancient memory of forbidden unions and corrupted bloodlines. The story of Atlantis, with its advanced civilization and sudden destruction, mirrors the biblical warning against pride and spiritual rebellion. In the biblical worldview, the worship of these beings was a spiritual rebellion, a return to the deception of Eden, where the serpent tempted humanity to seek forbidden knowledge and power. The legends of mermaids and the Marine Kingdom may be echoes of this ancient temptation, drawing people toward the mysteries of the deep. Were these ancient gods, monsters, and mermaids simply myth, or were they distorted memories of real beings, offspring of the Watchers or genetically altered creatures who led humanity astray and left their mark on our stories and even the fossil record? The legends of the griffin, the chimera, and other hybrid creatures may reflect the same spiritual and genetic corruption that Genesis 6 and Jubilees 5:1 warn against. These stories blend into the myths of sea monsters and mermaids, blurring the line between land and sea, human and beast. Even after the flood, the Bible records the resurgence of giants, Anakim, Rephaim, and others, who were again feared and in some cases revered by surrounding nations. But what happened to the monstrous animals, sea creatures, and mermaids of legend? The Israelites encountered these figures in Canaan, where their presence was tied to the idolatrous practices of the land. Now, when it comes to the fate of these legendary creatures, some look to the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle, a modern parallel to ancient tales of lost cities and vanished ships. where the sea seems to swallow all trace of life. The Bermuda Triangle, like Atlantis and the Marine Kingdom, is a place of mystery and fear, where the boundaries between the natural and supernatural seem to blur. Some see it as a modern echo of the ancient world's fascination with the unknown depths and the dangers that lurk there. When it comes to the extinction of ancient creatures, especially the dinosaurs, there are two main views. Many scientists point to the Ice Age as the event that wiped out the dinosaurs and other prehistoric beasts, suggesting a natural, gradual process of extinction. However, from a biblical perspective, it is the flood that stands as the pivotal event that changed the world and led to the extinction of giants, monsters, and perhaps even the legendary beings of the sea. Something happened to the world. Some say it was the Ice Age, others say it was the flood. The biblical account emphasizes the flood as the decisive event, while the Ice Age theory remains a scientific alternative. The persistence of these legends, giants, dragons, mermaids, and lost cities, suggests that the spiritual and genetic influence of the Nephilim was not easily erased. Did the flood or the Ice Age finally bring an end to these creatures? The biblical account emphasizes the flood as the decisive event, while the Ice Age theory remains a scientific alternative. The debate continues, but both views agree that something catastrophic changed the world and brought an end to the age of giants and monsters, including the dinosaurs. Later giants and the echoes of monstrous beasts and sea legends were reminders of the ongoing temptation to elevate created beings above the Creator and of the lingering effects of ancient corruption. The conquest of Canaan was not just a military campaign, but a theological one, an effort to purge the land of idolatry, monstrous bloodlines, and perhaps even the last of the corrupted beasts and sea deities, restoring exclusive worship of Yahweh. The destruction of the giant clans and the fading of dragon and mermaid legends marked the end of a long struggle to uphold the first commandment and break the cycle of worshipping false gods and corrupted creatures. God's command to drive out the inhabitants was rooted in the need to eliminate the spiritual and genetic legacy of the Nephilim, those who had become objects of idolatry, and perhaps the monstrous animals and sea beings that inspired myths of Atlantis, Dagon, and mermaids. This was about purifying the land from a spiritual and genetic corruption that threatened to undermine the exclusive worship of God and the integrity of His creation. The legends of monsters, dragons, mermaids, and the reality of post-flood giants are reminders of humanity's ancient struggle with idolatry and corruption. A struggle to recognize and worship the Creator alone, as commanded in Exodus 23, and to resist the temptation to elevate the men of renown and their monstrous legacy to the status of gods. While some point to the Ice Age, or the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle, as explanations for the disappearance of these creatures, including the dinosaurs, the biblical perspective holds that it was the flood that truly changed the world and brought an end to these ancient beings. The echoes of these questions remain in global myths and biblical perspectives to this day. When exploring the echoes of Genesis 6, two figures from the Philistine world stand out: Goliath, the giant warrior, and Dagon, the enigmatic god worshipped by the Philistines. But there is another mystery woven into these ancient stories, the SeaofMa'uk, as described in the Book of Jubilees. Goliath is often remembered as a literal giant, a formidable human adversary descended from the ancient line of giants, but still mortal and flesh and blood. Yet, the SeaofMa'uk, possibly identified with the mysterious South Atlantic, looms as a different kind of threat, a vast, unknown abyss that haunted the imagination of ancient peoples. In contrast, Dagon was not a man, but a spiritual entity, a god of the Philistines, depicted as part man, part fish, and revered as a source of power and fertility. His very image evokes the mysteries of the deep, the unknown realms beneath the sea, and the ancient fear of what might dwell there. The true confrontation between Israel and the Philistines was not just physical, but spiritual, a battle between the God of Israel and the deceptive powers behind idols like Dagon. These powers were often associated with the sea, the abyss, and the unknown. In 1 Samuel 5:2-4, after the Philistines captured the Ark of the Covenant, they placed it in the temple of Dagon. The next morning, Dagon had fallen face down before the ark. On the following day, Dagon was found again on the ground, his head and hands broken off, leaving only his torso. This echoes the ancient belief that the sea could swallow even the mightiest, erasing their memory beneath its waves. This dramatic scene illustrates the spiritual battle at play, the God of Israel triumphing over the spiritual forces represented by Dagon. The sea, like Dagon, was seen as a realm of chaos and hidden dangers, a place where the remnants of history and rebellion could be lost forever. While Goliath embodied the physical threat of the giants, echoes of the Nephilim, Dagon and the SeaofMa'uk symbolize the deeper spiritual deception and the abyss that threatened to engulf humanity. Ancient maritime cults, fearing the abyss, worshipped deities like Dagon in hopes of appeasing the powers beneath the waves. Genesis 6 describes not just physical corruption, but a spiritual rebellion, otherworldly beings influencing humanity and leading them astray. The sea in this context becomes a symbol of the hidden realms where these beings might dwell, and where the consequences of rebellion are concealed from human eyes. Dagon, as a spiritual entity, represents this ongoing deception, a false god drawing people away from the Creator, much like the Watchers of Genesis 6. The SeaofMa'uk, with its unfathomable depths, stands as a reminder of the hidden dangers and forgotten histories lurking beneath the surface. The defeat of Dagon in his own temple is a powerful symbol. Spiritual deception is exposed and overcome by the true God. Likewise, the biblical narrative hints at a mysterious ocean that swallows the remnants of history, keeping the secrets of the past hidden in its depths. Goliath may have been a giant, but he was ultimately just a man. Dagon, however, stands as a symbol of the spiritual darkness and deception that traces back to Genesis 6, and the SeaofMa'uk as the abyss where such mysteries are hidden. In the end, it is Dagon and the SeaofMa'uk who are more directly connected to the Genesis 6 narrative, embodying the enduring threat of spiritual deception, the fear of the maritime abyss, and the hidden realms beneath the sea where the remnants of rebellion and history are swallowed and forgotten. As we reach the end of this journey, the Nephilim narrative stands revealed as a story of spiritual rebellion, deception, and destruction, a warning echoing through the ages. The SeaofMa'uk, a mysterious post-flood boundary, reminds us how the world was divided and reshaped, both physically and spiritually, after the flood. The Nephilim were not just giants, they were the embodiment of spiritual rebellion, their legacy rooted in defiance against God and the corruption of humanity. Genesis 6 reveals that idolatry's origins are intertwined with these fallen beings, as humanity sought power and meaning in what they could not comprehend. As people scattered after Babel, the memory of these spiritual deceptions traveled with them, shaping myths and religious practices across civilizations. This explains the recurring archetypes in world religions, echoes of a spiritual deception that began with the Nephilim and persists in idolatry. Yet not every legendary figure was supernatural. Goliath, for example, was a tall human, reminding us to distinguish myth from reality. The first commandment, "You shall have no other gods before me," remains central, warning us that idolatry is not just a cultural artifact, but a spiritual danger. The city of Ephesus in the ancient world was renowned for its devotion to Diana, known to the Greeks as Artemis, the great mother goddess whose temple was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The worship of Diana permeated every aspect of Ephesian life, from commerce to culture, and her image was revered across the Roman Empire. Silver shrines and idols of Diana were crafted and sold by local artisans, making idolatry not only a spiritual deception, but also a lucrative business. It was in this context that the Apostle Paul arrived in Ephesus, boldly proclaiming the gospel and exposing the futility of idol worship. His message threatened the very foundation of the city's economy and religious identity. Acts 19:23-41 recounts the dramatic confrontation. Quote, "About that time there arose a great disturbance about the way. A silversmith named Demetrius, who made silver shrines of Artemis, brought in a lot of business for the craftsmen there. He called them together, along with the workers in related trades, and said, 'You know, my friends, that we receive a good income from this business. And you see and hear how this fellow Paul has convinced and led astray large numbers of people here in Ephesus, and in practically the whole province of Asia. He says that gods made by human hands are no gods at all. There is danger not only that our trade will lose its good name, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited, and the goddess herself, who is worshipped throughout the province of Asia and the world, will be robbed of her divine majesty. Acts 19:23-27, NI5. Quote, "When they heard this, they were furious and began shouting, 'Great is Artemis of the Ephesians!' Soon the whole city was in an uproar. The people seized Gaius and Aristarchus, Paul's traveling companions from Macedonia, and all of them rushed into the theater together. Paul wanted to appear before the crowd, but the disciples would not let him. Even some of the officials of the province, friends of Paul, sent him a message begging him not to venture into the theater." Acts 19:28-31 NIV. Quote, "The assembly was in confusion. Some were shouting one thing, some another. Most of the people did not even know why they were there. The Jews in the crowd pushed Alexander to the front and they shouted instructions to him. He motioned for silence in order to make a defense before the people. But when they realized he was a Jew, they all shouted in unison for about 2 hours, 'Great is Artemis of the Ephesians!' Acts 19:32-34 NIV. Quote, "The city clerk quieted the crowd and said, 'Fellow Ephesians, doesn't all the world know that the city of Ephesus is the guardian of the temple of the great Artemis and of her image, which fell from heaven? Therefore, since these facts are undeniable, you ought to calm down and not do anything rash. You have brought these men here, though they have neither robbed temples nor blasphemed our goddess. If then Demetrius and his fellow craftsmen have a grievance against anybody, the courts are open and there are proconsuls. They can press charges. If there is anything further you want to bring up, it must be settled in a legal assembly. As it is, we are in danger of being charged with rioting because of what happened today. In that case, we would not be able to account for this commotion, since there is no reason for it." After he had said this, he dismissed the assembly. Acts 19:35-41 NI4. This episode in Ephesus powerfully exposes the persistence and power of idolatry, not only as a spiritual deception, but as a force that shapes economies, identities, and entire societies. Paul's confrontation with the silversmiths and the resulting uproar reveal how deeply entrenched idol worship was, and how the gospel's challenge to false gods could provoke fierce resistance. The uproar in Ephesus stands as a vivid reminder that the battle against idolatry is not merely ancient history, but an ongoing struggle wherever the truth of God confronts the deceptions of the world. The real threat is not in ancient legends themselves, but in letting false stories and idols shape our worldview and distract us from God's truth. Before we close, let's examine the Sethite view, a perspective that interprets Genesis 6 as describing the intermarriage between the godly line of Seth and the ungodly line of Cain, rather than fallen angels and humans. This interpretation has its roots in early Christian writings, especially the Book of Adam and Eve and the Cave of Treasures. While both texts seek to explain the origins of evil, they differ in their approach. The Book of Adam and Eve complements Genesis, Jubilees, and Enoch by acknowledging the reality of angelic rebellion and the supernatural elements behind humanity's corruption. In contrast, the Cave of Treasures downplays or contradicts these supernatural aspects, focusing instead on human genealogy and moral decline. Yet Scripture itself, Genesis 6:2, Jude 6, and 2 Peter 2:4, makes clear that angels can sin and transgress their boundaries, supporting the supernatural reading. The Sethite view is not entirely without merit, especially in its call to moral vigilance. But extreme forms that deny the possibility of angelic transgression are inconsistent with both biblical and apocryphal sources. We encourage you to explore these sources firsthand and reflect on how they shape your understanding of Genesis 6 and the enduring importance of the first commandment.